We have over 650 people in our organization. It's a lot of people to take care of. It's a lot of people to feed. And, we built this team during the pandemic when F&B was just completely decimated, right? And we were one of the one of the lucky ones who were able to hire a bunch of people, give them livelihood. And I've come to treat them as family. And, that keeps me going every day. They need me to be at the top of my game. They need me to keep inspiring them. They need me to motivate them. They need me to raise funds. I work for them, basically, right?
As Uber founder Travis Kalanick prepared to leave Uber's board of directors in 2019, he was already hyping his next venture, a startup called Cloud Kitchens that rents out space to restaurants for delivery-only services like DoorDash. He predicted at the time that the startup would be bigger than Uber. Microsoft came in as an investor, part of their $850 million funding round that closed in November 2021 that valued the LA-based company at apparently $15 billion. Now, while we await to see that story unfold, on the other side of the wall is Kimberly Yao, a seasoned F&B operator turned founder of CloudEats that takes a different approach to cloud kitchens. Founded in 2018, her company today is the largest cloud kitchen company in the Philippines, poised to become the largest in Southeast Asia thanks to its proprietary tech, strong brand, and competitive unit economics. This week, we chat with Kim on the challenge of scaling 1 to 100 and how each stage of growth requires a different version of a CEO. Well, I actually think this is a good way to start. You're ending the year. 2022 was really tough for many of us, right? And of course, as we head into what many believe is already here, the recession and market headwinds and things like that. How are you feeling about this year?
I think it's been a long year. We've been very busy. At the same time, it's been a year of self-reflection, I would say. So when you run so fast to try to achieve something, you just keep going at the speed of light, and then you kind of forget about looking inward and just trying to understand what happened. Was that the best approach? And all of these things go into your head. And I think now we just closed our office today, and we're taking a break for the next 10 days, and it just gives you some time to just stop and think. And the year has been long. The year has been great. We did 2 fundraising rounds in the last 12 months, not 1 but 2, and I think it's a great achievement. But yeah, there's more to do next year, and I'm looking forward to it.
Congratulations on all that. I mean, despite how tough, we as VCs, as investors, are definitely in the belief that the fundraising winter is already here, and the fact that you were able to do that despite the headwinds, I think is a testament to what your business is set out to do, right? So fingers crossed there. I mean, of course, with entrepreneurs, it's always up and down, and then up again, and you never know. But
That's
let's
right.
get started, in true billion-dollar moves fashion before we dive a little bit deeper into your business. But give us a little bit of context of who Kim Yao is and, what sort of is pivotal in getting you to who you are today.
Wow, it's a very loaded question. Can spend a lot of time on that, but just to make it quite short. So I guess you can say I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've built many businesses over the last 15 years or so, and I spent over a decade focused in F&B, as in food and beverage. I guess throughout the companies that I've built and scaled, the one recurring theme was food and beverage, which I'm very passionate about. I'm not a chef, but I love cooking and eating. So more than anything, what I love about being an entrepreneur in this industry is I get a chance to take a very traditional industry like food service into the future. I would say that there are not many industries left that haven't been disrupted, and food service is definitely one of them. My entire career has been in this industry, both on the brick and mortar side, which is the retail side, as well as on online and the tech-enabled side. When I started Boozy, so Boozy is it's a liquor delivery company here in the Philippines. When you think about it, the food, beverage, and food service industry is massive. However, it's also highly traditional, and it's one that tech hasn't really penetrated yet. It's a service industry. It's very high touch. It involves a lot of manual processes. It's really notorious for having thin margins, and it requires so much capital to scale. And when we built CloudEats, we wanted to change that. So over the last 3 years, we've built this hyper scalable cloud kitchen model, which we think is just bringing this industry into the future. So yeah, I think that, in a few short words, it's pretty much where I came from, what I'm passionate about, and where we're at CloudEats today.
Yeah, and if I may, I like to dive a little bit deeper in the way that maybe you haven't spoken before. What really brought you to F&B? And when you say it's your passion, how did you arrive at that?
So I grew up in restaurants. My parents always had restaurants growing up. I did my homework in the restaurant. I literally, went there after school, and I spent a lot of time there. And I think it just became like my second home. Like at some point in time, maybe when I was 5 to 8, because my parents were at the restaurant so often, I pretty much lived there, right? It was like my living room. So I think that, growing up just made me understand how food makes people happy, how food, fills your stomach literally, but it also fills your heart, and people come together, and food just makes people happy. So, I wanted to reimagine food for today's world, which is for delivery. And then the process of how I arrive at CloudEats is quite interesting, because I went from being in traditional food and beverage, which is literally building restaurants, building concepts like physical stores. And then I started this liquor delivery company, right, which is just mainly beverage. And then it kind of comes like full circle with CloudEats, with food and beverage and technology. And I think it's just it's a great progression, I would say. And I got lucky in that sense, because it's not always easy to do something that you love. But in this case, I guess I was quite fortunate in terms of that.
That is an interesting point. And to arrive at your passion and actually make it, your career, it's not as easy. And as you said, with F&B, it is really tough, right? The margins, and every other day there's competition, and now you're going into cloud kitchens as big guys on the forefront. What keeps you going? I mean, when it gets really, really hard, and what keeps you sticking to the fact that, okay, your passion could actually be your career?
I think, what keeps me going is the opportunity. That's quite clear to me. If you were able to take the opportunity out there and convert that into an action plan, or convert that into a strategy, I think, there's unlimited opportunities in that sense. So if you have like one kind of cloud kitchen model today, it's so easy to come up with something else, innovate. And then the harder part is actually making sure that you follow through on those concepts, right? Or on that theory. So for me, that's one. The other thing is the people. So today we have over 650 people in our organization. Wow. It's a lot of people to take care of. It's a lot of people to feed. And we built this team during the pandemic, when F&B was just completely decimated, right? And we were one of the one of the lucky ones who were able to hire a bunch of people, give them livelihood. And I've come to like treat them as family. And, that keeps me going every day. They need me to be at the top of my game. They need me to keep inspiring them. They need me to motivate them. They need me to raise funds. They need me to, I work for them basically, right? So my job is to give them the tools, resources to succeed, and they form part of the business. Without them, the company wouldn't be there. So I think, more than anything, it's the people as well.
As some of you may know, Bill and Della Moves is proud to now be a part of the Creators Program at the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. That means we're also in good company with podcasts like CEO School, hosted by Sunira Madani, committed to closing the gender gap and helping more women level up by sharing stories and strategies from powerful women in leadership. Yep, because nothing bad happens when women make more money. I particularly love the episode with OG Girl Boss, Sophia Amoroso, on building companies and failing hard on the grand public stage. Listen to CEO School wherever you get your podcasts. Certainly speaks to your service-based leadership in many ways, which is somewhat common in Asia. It's different from the American style of me, right? I do this, I achieved all this, which is, I think, something I personally admire. Tell me, from Boozy, what happened in that chapter? I mean, that was, focused on alcohol delivery specifically, to your door. What did you learn in that chapter before you moved on to CloudEats?
Yeah. So that was it started as a side hustle. We had a lot of connections with the supply in terms of the liquor distributors, in that sense, or the brands. I mean, this was 2017, so it's a while back. And in the Philippines, at least at that time, there was no way that you could buy liquor on demand. So the idea was, how could we make liquor accessibility quick? How could we, bring the party to people, basically, right? So it was a very convenience driven play. And we thought that liquor was a very sticky category. So once you get them in, they'll always come back. And it was one of the e-commerce categories that nobody else was focusing on, because there was like generalists out there, grocery, they were already doing all of these things, but there was no one focusing on a specialty. And we thought that with the supply that we had, the access to the supply would be a great business model to start. So it started as a side hustle. We put in like $20,000. We were 4 founders. And a year after that, it became something that other big companies were interested in. So, one of the people who contacted us was the owner of a large conglomerate in the Philippines who owned the biggest liquor or spirit company, basically, right? So when these guys come calling and they say, "Hey, we want to take a look at your business," and I'm like, "Well, hold on, this is something that is very interesting to us, but what's in it for us, right?" And I was very young back then, so the agreement was, they would come and invest, they would help us to scale the business up. And I think that's what I learned. So to your question, right, what did I learn in that process? I guess it's not enough to want to run a business. It's not enough to start a business and to have passion, but it's also important to learn how to scale, right? Because if you go from 0 to 1, that's maybe easier, but from 1 to 100, that's when you need to level up. Your skills change, the attitude that you have and the behavior you have, on a day-to-day basis, midterm, long-term, it just changes. You need to change in order to, have a business that is of a larger scale in that sense. So before that, all my other businesses were, very entrepreneurial, quite scrappy, very resourceful. It was really my own, right? And this time I had to work with 3 other people. I had to work with a large conglomerate who had, governance, all of these and it was a learning process. I think it was great. It was, how do you go from 1 to 100 and 100 to 1,000? And I think that helped me with my second startup, which is CloudEats, because then I didn't have to start from scratch and I didn't have to start from like a lower base, because I understood what big companies like these guys were looking for when they wanted to invest in a young startup.
Yeah, and that's a very important point, actually. Notably, one of the founders that I had on early on the podcast sold his company for close to $1 billion. And one of the challenges he said he faced was scaling himself. He actually realized, the skill sets was very different. And he looked at his co-founder, and his co-founder was able to be agile and adapt. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because you were sort of on the ground and you were experiencing this, give us give us an example of what this looks like between 0 to 1 and 1 to 100.
I guess for me, because it's been 3 years since we launched the company, so it's like I think about it as year 1, year 2, and year 3, and I had to be a different sort of CEO in year 1 versus year 2 versus year 3. At the beginning, it was all me, right? You have to do everything yourself, call everybody yourself, sign every check yourself, and you have to make sure that the wheels are turning, right? So it was a lot of on the ground stuff. I had boots on the ground, and everybody needed me for everything. So the responsibility then was, get the right people on board, or at the time, anybody who would want to work for you, right? And then, all of these people that you have on board, because it's a new company, fresh company, you'd have to make sure that you're there for them, you support them. And then when you go in the second phase of the company, when, proof of concept is done, great, people invested in your company, now what, right? Now you have a bunch of money, and how do you spend it? So the first thing that we really spent on is like a better management team. Then you have PR, then people know, a little bit about your company, and then you can hire more experienced people, better people, like a management team to help you put things in place, right? And this is like the beginning of scale. So at this point in time, it's like, how do you train the trainers? How do you train the people who are supposed to do things, right? So then you become a guidance counselor. Then you become like a trainer, a coach, basically. And then as we go to the third year, the number of people just completely explodes. At some point in time, it's like you hire people who you don't even meet. You forget about how many people there are in each team, and there's just too many people, right? So I think at that point in time, when you get to that point, and it's just physically impossible to directly have a relationship with each and every single person. Then you need to be like a motivator. You need to be an inspiring role. So then you become the CEO motivator, CEO inspiration, right? Because you're there with 600 other people who are looking at, what is she going to say next? What are we going to do next? Like, what is the evolution of our vision, right? And I think, throughout those stages, you're right. I had to become a very agile leader, as the requirements, change very quickly, right? And sometimes it scares me, to be honest, because it's a big responsibility, right? But at the same time, it excites me also because I'm willing to change. I'm willing to learn. I think as long as you're open to what's next, as long as you're open to the unknown, then there's an opportunity for you to improve yourself as well.
Love that. And so you were in Boozy for how long, and how big did it grow into? So two questions in one there.
Yeah. So we started in 2017. The business grew quite quickly in a short period of time. So by 2019, we had been acquired, like a majority stake of Boozy had been acquired. I was the CEO for 2 years. And then after that, by the beginning of 2019, they wanted to, change management. They had a couple of people that they put in place. And also I had met my now co-founder, and, he pitched me this crazy idea, and we can talk about that later on. But I was quite attracted to that F&B, tech model, which I didn't know much about at that time. But he, pretty much convinced me to start this new venture, and that was in March of 2019. So I was at Woozy for 2 years, and that was sort of like my jump off point to CloudEats.
Yeah, so in that 2 years, you said it grew rather significantly in a short amount of time. Did it now cover? And of course, I actually, this is remiss, but let's talk a little bit about Philippines as well. So were you delivering across the entire country already by then, or?
No, we were delivering it at the northern part of the country, which is where the capital is located. So Metro Manila is a very big, densely populated city. There's 12 million people in the capital. And that alone was like a monumental task, right? And today, Woozy is in the north and in the center, a central part of the Philippines. And we cover about, I would say, like 18 million people. So 18 million people have the opportunity to order on Woozy. In the main city, it's on demand. So if you order now, it arrives in like 60, 70 minutes. And then in the further parts, it would be like same day.
And also for context, of course, because we have North American listeners,
right.
Philippines is full of islands, right? So it's not as common. I mean, these days, actually, I will say as Americans, and it's, we're close to Christmas. And I will say Prime Delivery, it's like the joke that the comedian says, you can literally be in your bed, snap your fingers, and then there you have toilet paper, a hammer, a this, a that. So we take it for granted. But can you tell us a little bit about where Philippines is in sort of the e-commerce delivery space?
We do have 7,107 islands, plus or minus 10, depending on the tide. Short anecdote on that. If you think about having to do logistics in a place, in a country with 7,000 islands, is a nightmare. Monumental task to guys like, so here there's a company called Lazada, which is pretty much like the Amazon of Southeast Asia. And they took on that challenge, and they launched 6 or 7 countries in one day. And they put like CEOs in every country, and they said, we're going to build Amazon of Southeast Asia. And they did. So today it's, Lazada and Shopee are the two huge marketplace players here in Southeast Asia. E-commerce space, I would say it started booming really in 2016, 2017. Internet penetration was quite low back then. Smartphone penetration was also quite low, and it completely changed when the China smartphones that were like $100, $100 each just started flooding the market, and it became quite accessible to have a phone that can download apps that can connect to the internet like on demand, and that changed the game. Everyone in retail had to adapt, and everyone had to have an online implementation arm. Traditional companies started talking to guys like Lazada and say, so how do I sell online? And I think that was the time when we also started Boozy. And even though it's a niche vertical, it was basically beverage or alcoholic beverages at that time. It just showed as well how if you do it right, then you can definitely penetrate that market and scale up.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that you say it's 2016, 2017. And, Lazada, I guess taking a little bit of a step back as well, was, of course, by the Rocket Internet brothers, right?
Yes.
And this is a strategy that really, I think, changed Southeast Asia in a large way, and Asia as well, right? Where they came in. And this leads in actually to your co-founder, which is now the next chapter I want to get into. Jacopo was from Food Panda, which was a Rocket Internet company. I mean, he came in, pretty much as many of these Rocket Internet guys do, very,
guy heavy at that point in time. I will say it
Yep.
might have changed now, but these guys that basically just graduated, had MBAs, no real work experience, but were given a lot of responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you met him at a time where he was exiting Food Panda and threw you this idea. Tell us a little bit about that and what convinced you to jump ship, I guess, as you were exiting anyway, Boozy.
To be honest, I think it was a big blind leap of faith at that point in
Mm.
time. So I met Jacopo through Inaj. Inaj was the former CEO of Lazada. If you think about the three of us, it's like the holy trinity. So there's e-commerce, there's F&B, and there's food delivery. It's like the perfect triangle for a cloud kitchen business. So Inaj was quite occupied with another project at that time. So he said, "Why don't you guys, meet, talk about this concept that Jacopo and I have and see if you want to come and execute and be CEO." And I said, "Okay." No one wants to do it. And they're like, "Oh, because Inaj had this, he started this VC, and then Jacopo was still in Food Panda." So I said, "Okay, well, if you don't want to leave Food Panda for this concept, then maybe it's not that good, right?" And he said, "No, no, no, it's not like that."
That's my question.
Right? I mean, it's like, so why do you want me to do it? Well, how about you, right? Our agreement was that I would start the business, and when it reaches a certain point, then then he would leave Food Panda and come join me full time, right? So at that point, I had just exited Boozy. I was looking for my next thing, and I said, "Okay." And then Inaj was like, "Okay, since you are starting the business, you be CEO." I said, "Okay, sure, I can do that. Don't worry about it." The agreement that I had with Jacopo was when we reach 100 orders a day, which was, like a magic number in my mind at that time, then you leave Food Panda and you come and join. So he said, "Okay, deal." And then I said, "So, based on information that you have and whatever, when do you think this is going to happen?" He goes, "Probably 6 to 8 months." So I said, "Okay, I can do that. That's fine. Let's see how it goes." And so it was like I said, a blind leap of faith. I get everything going. We find our first cloud kitchen, and I literally had to do everything myself. So I was walking in the street, talking to everybody who would rent, a place for crazy people who want to do a 24/7 cloud kitchen that never shuts down. Finally found one, launched the business, and the thing is, in 6 or 7 weeks, we were doing 100 orders a day. So then I go to Jacopo
Wow.
and I go, "Oh, so what now?" Right? He goes, "Okay, well, a deal's a deal. So, let me put in my 90 days, and I guess the rest is history." But I guess at that point in time, he, just wanted some comfort in his decision, because he wanted to be like more of a grassroots entrepreneur, right? Like to start really something of his own. And I think he had a lot of experience from his Food Panda and Rocket Internet time that he wanted to bring to something that is of his own and that we could start together. So yeah, so he joined me in October of 2019, which was like a couple of months after we started the business. And yeah, we're still here. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, yeah. And Kim, you're skiing over this, but how did you? I mean, it was a blind leap of faith, but you knew enough as an entrepreneur that first of all, the idea was sound. I suppose that was
Mm-hmm.
potential. We need to talk a little bit about cloud kitchens that not everybody
Yeah.
understands as well the concept of.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the idea, and then it was the person. How did you evaluate this? Because I think we were talking a little bit early in the prelude that choosing your partner is the
Yeah.
most important decision that you'll make. I mean, in personal life and in business, right? So how
Yeah.
did you decide? Okay, and you hardly took a break, right, after Boozy.
Couple of months, I think 2 months. And then I just jumped back into it. Yeah. How did I decide? So obviously I trusted Inaj a lot. Inaj is the one who introduced the two of us. He was one of the leaders in the tech scene in the Philippines back then, and it was very small, right? There were not many founders. There were not many startups back then compared to now. I guess before there were like a handful. Like if we do a tech startup meet, I would be the only female, and there would be like 10 other guys there. So it was a very different scene back then, and we all knew each other, right? So I think the opportunity to work with Inaj and Jacopo appealed to me a lot, because even though I started Boozy, I wasn't in the big tech scene, right? I wasn't Rocket Internet, like unlike the both of them. So I think that what convinced me was that I knew I had tons of stuff to learn from them, right? It was like they had the Bible for how to build a tech startup and scale it up and fundraise, and they basically sold me this idea, and I said, okay, let's do it, right? And at that point in time, I always knew that, hey, even if this doesn't work out, there's always something else that I could do, because I was always an entrepreneur. So if I build something and it fails, I could always build something again. As compared to, hey, if I join this company and it doesn't work out, oh no, I'm disgraced and maybe other people won't hire me, right? But because I'm a builder, I always knew that even if this doesn't work out, I can do something again some other time, right? So I always, I had that confidence. But at the same time, like you said, the business model, it was so relevant to me because when I had restaurants before, when I was managing like a hospitality company, you would invest a lot of time, capital, training, resources into something physical, and it would take you a lot of time to recover that investment. And the turnover rate of these concepts were very high, at least in the Philippines, right? At the same time, the like mortality rate of restaurants, I guess everywhere around the world, is very high. So if you open a restaurant, there's like 65% chance that it doesn't work out in the first year, right? So the industry is very notorious for that, and the concept just appealed to me so much because it fixed a lot of pain points that I had gone through for over 10 years, right? It's like put in a bunch of capital into this place and no one shows up, right? And then what do? You sunk all of your time and effort into this project. You built the place for 6 months, and then people don't like the concept, people don't like the food, and then you have to shut down, right? And that has happened to me a lot of times in the past. And I think that this cloud kitchen concept just fixed a lot of those pain points in terms of scaling up an F&B business. So I was very interested, to say the least, because of that, and also the opportunity to learn from the both of them.
We all have bad habits, like, I don't know, procrastinating on that to-do list that's getting longer and longer. And bad habits tend to find their way into business too. From emailing clients at who knows o'clock, or spending way too much time and money on legacy software your IT person grandfathered in. Well, we're breaking up with the bad business habits and breaking in new ways to bring out A game in 2023. HubSpot's all-in-one connected CRM platform can help you there. It makes it easy to better connect your teams, data, and systems so you can better connect with your customers. Best of all, it's free to get started. Learn how HubSpot can help your business grow better in 2023 and get a special offer of 20% off on eligible plans at HubSpot.com/billion-dollar-moves. Tell us about this cloud kitchen and how it's exploded. I will say in the pandemic, I was just tuning into Kitopi as well, that started in Dubai. Of course, we know in the US, Uber Eats, DoorDash, what else? Grubhub, and that has a whole story tied into Food Panda, Rocket Internet, and so on and so forth. But it's a huge business that has just exploded. Tell us about how Cloud Kitchen works.
Our model of Cloud Kitchen is a bit different from, I guess, what you're used to in North America. So the whole industry started because of Travis Kalanick creating this company literally called Cloud Kitchens, right? So he's built the company that was the namesake of the industry. And the idea that he had was quite simple, right? He took a large space, he subdivided it into smaller like pocket kitchens, and he would lease them out to restaurants who didn't want to build their own facility if they wanted to expand to different locations, right? And I think that's great, but then you need a lot of capital because you need to fit out large spaces, and then your issue would be occupancy, right, and performance of the tenants that you don't control. Right. So I thought that, that was interesting, but it's not the model that we wanted to do. And then, like you mentioned, there are these guys like Kitopi who took that one step further and said, hey, apart from the real estate, I also want to sell the service, which is the people cooking the food, and also the technology, right? So they basically go to third-party brands or restaurants and they say, hey, if you want to expand to Dubai, Qatar, Doha, anywhere in the Middle East, you can come to Kitopi. We do everything for you. Just, give us the recipes. We sign an NDA and we'll control we'll optimize all of your online food delivery operations, which is smart, right? But at the same time, you also need a lot of capital, which we didn't have at that point. So we said, okay, what if we build these cloud kitchens? We control the infrastructure, but what if we build the brands as well, right? Which is was not very popular back then for a couple of reasons. But I guess in emerging markets like the Philippines and Vietnam, where we're at, people are more open, I guess, to trying new things. So if you look at the landscape in the F&B industry in the Philippines, if you ask people what burger, like the first thing that comes up in your mind when you say burger, you'd be surprised at how many people don't say McDonald's or how many people don't say Burger King, right? It's just a very fragmented industry because people are very curious about trying new things, and there's a lot of local players and local heroes, right? So given that landscape, we said, why don't we create the brands as well? Because then we can control all the inputs so that the outputs are 100% covered or managed by us, right? So all of the brands that we have in our cloud kitchens today, we develop them ourselves, from concept to menu to what they look like on the platforms to pricing. So everything is basically controlled by us. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, productivity, the efficiency levels are quite high for us. Because if you're a cook in our kitchen, you cook for all of the brands we have. And today in the Philippines, it's 40 brands. So there's 40 brands being cooked in one location. As compared to if you're in a cloud kitchen in the US, there's a 10 square meter space for brand A, 10 square meter space for brand B. And those spaces, are mutually exclusive, right? They don't have any shared resources, whether it's people or equipment, they're completely separate, right? So if you think about productivity or efficiency, it's not very high. So for us, we layered the brands on top of the infrastructure, which is the cloud kitchen. And now we have these cloud restaurants, right? So it's really a hybrid cloud restaurant, cloud kitchen model. I don't think anyone calls it cloud restaurants. Maybe only we do, but it's just a cute term for like virtual restaurants, basically. So the restaurants that we have are fully online. They're digitally native in that sense. And they exist on the food delivery platforms where they're optimized for search, and we understand how the algorithms work, especially with Jacopo's experience in Food Panda. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but I think it's a winning model, especially here and in this part of the world where, like I mentioned, the food landscape is quite unique.
That's a great point that I didn't think about, that the brand loyalty, of course, is very important. And the fact that, because one of the questions I had was, what stops from a McDonald's from, just doing a version of this, right? Because they have all the data. I mean, we all know by now everything is data driven, so they know what we're putting out there. And I guess to your point, one of it is that Filipinos and a lot of Southeast Asians are just hungry, literally, but hungry for more choice and variety, and not glued to the big brands, which as well, many don't know this, but in Asia, it's actually marked up, right? It's almost like a premium brand to
it is a premium
get
brand.
A burger.
It's not a fast food.
McDonald's.
Yeah, it's not like US fast food price. I guess to your question, maybe one other thing that stops them or restricts them, limits them, like these big brands like McDonald's, Burger King, from doing something like this is they're just a very big company, and a small move that they would like to make takes them a long time and a titanical effort to do, right? So if you think about new product launches, there was a Sakura milk tea. It was a beverage that McDonald's launched. And when we spoke to somebody who worked on the McDonald's launch of this, it took them like 8 months to develop a plan and implement this plan to basically launch one beverage, right? I mean, it's a great beverage, I must say, but at the same time, the agility of these companies, because they're just so big, is very limited. So for us, if you ask me, how many brands do we launch every month? It's like 8, right? And we iterate very quickly. If you ask me how many dishes we launch, then we'll spend the whole day talking about it. But it's the idea is basically we're quite agile, right? So we use our resources to test. We have a lot of hypotheses, and the testing is quite exciting, actually, because then you let the market tell you what they like, what they don't like, and it's fast. It's like an accelerated brand building process. Versus if you are guys like McDonald's, then you go to Nielsen, and Nielsen does this whole expensive, long study, and then it's a really long process, right? Which think at that scale they need, and at that at that opportunity works for them. But I guess as a startup who was like trying to get things going very fast, then we have a different approach to it.
Inefficiency is one that you're solving for. And of course, because it's so fragmented in Southeast Asia, this efficiency and convenience is amplified, right? That people definitely see the value of it versus, I don't know, in the US, where how's your price point? Is it also cheaper, would you say, for the way that you're selling things?
Yeah. So one of our, one of the things that we value is that we position our brands as having high value for money. So to your question, if you look at like Shake Shack, for example, here sells a burger for like a chicken burger for $5-6. Our chicken burger is at $2.50, right? $2.50. We are able to give you a high quality, very similar burger for half the price. So that's one example. If you take, for example, Salad Stop again, and another, I think, quite important example, they sell a Caesar salad wrap for $8. And I remember this because I just bought one the other day. It's quite good. But at the same time, who can afford $8 for a snack at best, right? Or a lunch, like a wrap in a country where, the average family makes $400 a month, right? So, I mean, who can afford $8 for a Salad Stop wrap? Nobody, right? So what we did was we took everything in Salad Stop and try to, replicate that, localize it, and have everything for half the price. So it's really trying to give the highest quality food possible for the best price point. And I mean, we're not trying to say that we're cheap. I don't think the word is cheap, but I think it's high value for money. So you get more than what you pay for compared to the other competitors out there. And I guess the beauty of having a large brand portfolio, today we have 40, as I mentioned earlier, is that we can go anywhere from selling we have brands that do $2 average basket size. These are like our value brands. So it's like a very simple meals at $2, but we also go up to burgers that are at $12, for example, right? And because we, again, have a high efficiency play, all of these different dishes are being cooked in the same place by the same people with the same resources or the same equipment. So whether it's a $12 burger or a $2 rice bowl, it's being done in the same way, in the same people, and using the same resources, which I think is quite a good way to really maximize the resources that you have.
Love that. And actually, this is really fascinating. Sometimes I will say I do cave into the ease of just having a delivery versus cooking myself quite often, especially when it gets hectic. But sometimes I question, oh my goodness, this is meant to be Chinese. It doesn't actually taste as native. It must be from a different kitchen. That's what it is.
This whole topic about cooking versus like ordering in, it's become so pronounced because of the pandemic, right? So now that, the people are coming out of the pandemic, everything is sort of coming back to normal. I think the convenience of that ordering of food online is not something that you can replace anymore. It's literally ingrained in people that you can sit at home, watch Netflix, have a few clicks on your phone, and food shows up, right? And I think that whole concept is not something that you can erase from people's minds anymore. They got so used to it, they saw the value of it. And sometimes I even tell myself, I don't think we're just selling food, but we're selling convenience. Because you can order from us any time of the day. It shows up at your door so fast because our cooking time is so low. So it's really a convenience factor that I think is also gives us the edge.
So what worries you you've got sort of, the shift of behavior as you're talking about, right? So that's a strong shift of behavior that I don't think we're going back of even the brick and mortar businesses because they felt it, right? What does worry you in your expansion as you think about next steps?
A couple of things. I guess one is, circling back to people, right? Because we're a heavily operational business, we require people to scale, although it's not linear. So we don't require as many people as you think, but we do require manpower to scale, right? And the more people that you have, the more relationships you need to manage and the more complexity there is, right? So I think as we go into our 4th year of business, I have to recalibrate myself again to understand how it's best to approach a large team, right? Apart from people, I think one of the things also that I've been thinking about is how to scale our technology. It's at the beginning, the technology was a means to an end. And now that we understand that the tech is something that is more than that, how do we press on that? How do we package it in such a way that, it either becomes a life of its own, like we spin it off, or it becomes part of CloudEats. And those are the things that we talk about with our investors, with our board. But what scares me is that if we do, start focusing on this tech piece, does it risk having a less focus on our core business today? So I think it's just a matter of prioritization in terms of, how big do you want this technology portion of your business to be, versus what you have today, which is basically 99.9% of your revenues, right? Which is where you should be focusing on. Because it's attractive to have tech, it's attractive to accelerate tech development, but also it's scary because then you're one person and you need people to be able to scale.
Well, is it what this brings me to a question that I often have when I speak to entrepreneurs, because obviously in venture, you get the big money when it's SaaS, right? When it's technology, it's no longer technology enabled, but it is a technology platform for other things. But the question that I do ask entrepreneurs is, does it take you away from what you actually set out to do?
So I've heard that so many times, right? Oh, SaaS multiples are crazy. You should do SaaS. You should find a way to put SaaS in your business. And it makes you think about things deeply, because on one hand, you have a business that revolves around food, which is the demand will never falter, right? People will always eat. And it's a stable business and there's a clear path to profitability. But at the same time, you get people telling you, oh, but you need to build software and you need to do something that is completely out of your comfort zone and, is not going to make you revenues for the foreseeable future, right? So those are like two different schools of thought, right? So I guess, what's scary about that is trying to understand where to position yourself. And right now, we do want to understand how far we can go with the tech, but trying to find a balance between that is, I think, now more important than ever. Because when we raised this last round, the understanding was we would start working on the tech piece. So we hired bunch of developers. Today we have 14 of them, and we never had an engineering team before. So then it's another group of people that you need to manage. But it's also exciting at the same time, because when you see their output, it's like, wow, if we had this team before, then it wouldn't have taken us this long to scale. And tech is the power to scale. So putting them together, I think, is where the next challenge is for myself and Jacopo in that sense.
Yeah, and tell us now about scale. I mean, with your last funding round, last two, that's going to, power your focus in sort of doing the tech bit of it. But how does this, are you looking for, the next 50 brands? Like what is the end goal here?
It's not looking for the next 50 brands, but it's looking at the current portfolio and seeing which brands could become our hero brands, right? So, if you're a food group, you would have your star restaurants or your star brands that would do, where your revenue is concentrated and where your resources are also allocated. And after 3 years of having these brands incubated, we understand that we have a handful of brands that are going to be basically our cash cows, right? They're going to be our profit centers. Understanding which brands will yield us the greatest results in terms of customer experience, in terms of product quality, in terms of profits is really our next line of thinking. So, people always say, so do you want to build 100 brands, 200 brands, 300 brands? What is it, right? Because for us, there's really no marginal cost to open a new brand. It's like this and that, and you can do that tomorrow, right? You can change whatever you want, name, price, pictures, anything. But I guess we've come to a point where that's not what we want to do, but we want to focus on, building brands that perform well. So we want high performing, high impact brands. And instead of actually opening more brands, we'd like to streamline the portfolio and focus on rather few select brands.
Yeah. And what makes a hero brand? I mean, if I could look at your current portfolio, which is the one that has the highest margins from what you've developed?
Well, there's a lot of brands. So, in terms of our hero brands, there's different ways of looking at it. What could be our most popular in terms of sales? What could be our most popular in terms of ratings? I guess one of our lead brands is this brand called Burger Beast. Not the same as Mr. Beast Burger in the US. We were actually first. We can talk about that another.
We'll remember that.
Yeah. I think it's a local, it's a local hero. So people identify with it as it's something that a Filipino made, and people like to support their own, right? So what we're actually doing with Burger Beast is we're taking it offline, which is quite interesting. So they're digital native brands. Now they're digital first because we get a chance to build offline stores for them. So our first offline store for Burger Beast is launching in February, Valentine's Day actually, or Feb 15th, something like that. But it's quite soon, and the dream is to bring to life these digital brands, right? And how do we do that? It's getting to create a touch point with customers through an offline. So I think it's it's a good way also of trying to understand how you go from online to offline in a smart way, right? Because then from our full portfolio brands, we picked the one which had the highest potential, and we basically brought it to life in this store, right? So I can update you about that. We're quite excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited. February 15th. So we'll see
Yes.
that. And I know you bring in influencers and celebrities as well, right, to help champion
Yeah.
these.
I guess another thing about the Philippines is that we're social media addicts in that sense. If you look us up, we spend the most time on social media compared to any other country in the world. It's insane. From the last time I checked, it's 10 hours on social media, and the US is doing about 4 hours on social media. So you see the disparity between the how much time we spend on social media, and because of that, I guess the marketing power of online leaders, celebrities, and personalities just skyrockets because people are glued to their phones. And when they want to eat something, when they want to buy something, whatever these people say on Instagram, pops into your head. So it's just the way that the population here works, which is they're very social media driven.
Yeah, and it's a young population as well, right? That's really
It's very
driving.
young. Average age is 24, crazy young, even younger than Vietnam. So Vietnam average age is about 29. It's a very young population, tech savvy, and again, cuisine curious, which is great for us, right? So we have over 13 cuisines in our Philippine portfolio. So everything, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Western, everything you can think of. And I think it lends well to our business model.
Well, Kim, we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm excited for where this is headed. But it is now time for $1 billion questions. What is your synonym of money?
Ooh, rich?
Okay. What is your biggest failure to date?
Oh, wow. Maybe it's as a woman. This is not a quick answer, but since you asked, maybe as a woman, I don't have a family yet, and I'm not getting any younger. So I think that's one of my biggest failures. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, this deserves some commentary, but it is $1 billion questions. I'm going to keep myself in line here. What is your highest high?
Highest high. I'd have to say when I'm eating something that I love. I just, have a high when I have something that I absolutely love or something that I haven't tasted in a long time, and it just gives me a physical high.
What you wish you knew when you were younger and getting started?
Oh, wow. That it was not going to be easy, and it looks easy, but it's not.
So your advice for other entrepreneurs?
When you're an entrepreneur, it's a 24/7, 365 days a year role, right? It literally never stops. And I think that if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to do your own startup, you have to go in with both feet, and you have to love what you do, because you're going to spend a lot of time in it. And if you don't love what you do, it's not going to work out. So I think passion plus time and commitment equals the winning formula.
Love that. And well, that brings me to a quick one. What are your 3 principles that you live by?
For me, humility is very important. Even if you're successful, I think if you stay humble and you understand, how you got there, then you are able to keep that principle very strongly. The other thing is, integrity. Integrity for me is what you do when no one watches. It's what you do when no one's around, basically. And I think that if you have high integrity, everything flows from there. If you don't, then it's very difficult to succeed. The last thing is respect. So I think I always believe in this. You need to treat people the way that you want to be treated, right? And it's a very fundamental concept, but it's not something that everybody understands, especially when you're successful. There's always that, temptation to change who you are or become different just because you're rich or you're more money now or you're more control. But I think respecting people is one of the 3 things that I value the most.
Love it. And what will your legacy be? When all is said and done, what is Kim Yao's legacy?
I want to be a Filipina female leader or entrepreneur who was always like one of the first. So I always want to be like, one of our investors at Gobi actually told me, do you know that you're the Filipina founder who has raised the largest amount of venture capital? I said, I didn't know that, but thank you for letting me know, right? So what would be my next superlative as a female Filipina founder? And if you put those 2 words together, like 3 words, Filipina, female, and founder, it's very scarce. You don't get those 3 word combinations together in one person. So I think that would be my legacy.
Yeah, love that. Well, and that's why you're here, Kim. So we want to find ways to support you. But thank you so much for your time. I thought this
Thank
was
you.
intriguing. It was exciting, and we went into some depth in the short amount of time that we had. But yeah, keep doing you and keep raising the bar for Filipina female founders, for female founders and founders in general.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings and you've been listening to Billion Dollar Moves.